So it appears that the heavyweight division in the UFC is finally getting some clarity in terms of the title picture. Francis Ngannou obviously is the new champion after knocking out Stipe Miocic in their last meeting. And what's next for both guys? Well, everyone is wondering what's happening with Jon Jones, but apparently Jon Jones is kind of an afterthought at this point, as we've seen the public disputes, so to speak, about pay and coming to terms to an agreement that would make sense for both parties or all three parties involved. It appears that the UFC and Dana White are now targeting Francis Ngannou versus Derrick Lewis 2 sometime in the summer. Date to be determined, venue to be determined, location, blah, blah, blah. Drake, is this the right fight to make in the heavyweight division right now?
In terms of heavyweights and the heavyweight landscape, yes, it is. But in terms of the fight to make and one of the greatest fighters of all time, your light heavyweight champion who vacated the title to move up intentionally to fight at heavyweight and against the heavyweight champion because of his status. No, not in that case. No, it's one of those potentially once in a lifetime opportunities that we look to be missing out on because of all the backstage kind of things that go into play there. And I mean, that's good to see that Jon is sticking to his guns, right? You don't want to ever see fighters back down in important situations, which this is definitely one that we hope to get improvements on as time goes on continually. Definitely a very tricky one and tough one to tackle, as it has just been historically in this still rather young MMA sport that we have in the UFC's dealings and what have you. But it's kind of not surprising that it's turning out this way, because we know that Dana and the UFC have been very stubborn, depending on no matter who you are, right? Like, obviously, Jon Jones, pretty big name, but we've even seen in the past when, Conor McGregor doesn't show up to a press conference, he's going to push back the fight date, right? They were talking about doing that for UFC 200, but then Dana got a little grumpy with him. They moved it to 202, the Nate Diaz rematch. So doesn't quite matter who you are that often. So yeah, not surprising really. Even on fight night when when Ngannou beat Stipe, he was already talking about that Lewis rematch right away, was already making Jon Jones an afterthought. And in terms of the heavyweight division, as the heavyweight division, nobody else jumping in. Yeah, Derrick Lewis, I think, has earned his shot again at the UFC heavyweight title, and this time not under kind of odd late circumstances when he took on Daniel Cormier at UFC 230. And now he's the champion. Ngannou's the champion, the guy that he beat. You know how that first fight went. Very unlikely, knock on wood, that it goes that way again. So I'm excited for it, but of course that potential is always there. But no matter what, it's not as exciting as a possible Jon Jones and Ngannou fight, or Jon Jones against any heavyweight, because still, I don't believe that Jon Jones is going to fight at heavyweight. I have felt this way pretty much since we started talking about this in 2012, when everyone wanted the Cain Velasquez fight. Don't believe it's going to happen until he actually has a fight signed, which looks like that might not happen. Surprise.
Yeah, that'd be really disappointing if we go through all of this, public spats about pay and him posting all these photos of him just bulking up and then it never actually happens. That would be the biggest disappointment, I think, in UFC in a long time. I knew that this matchup was coming from the moment Derrick Lewis hit send on that tweet that said, "Shit, I'll do it for whatever," however the amount was. I knew that was the fight that the UFC was going to go with. Be like, look, Derrick Lewis will take the fight. Jon Jones wants too much money. Same management be damned, or at least at the time, same management be damned. Side note on that, Jon Jones apparently is on the verge of acquiring new representation based on recent tweets as well. So that's a whole nother side story that we can talk about once that becomes public information. But I like that this matchup is coming together if Jon Jones was not in the picture. Like you said, Derrick Lewis has done more than enough to earn another shot. I think 4 in a row in the heavyweight division is plenty when you're already in the top of the division, ranked up that high. Yeah, like you got to give it to him at some point, right? So it just makes sense. And Francis Ngannou is, look, it's an opportunity to correct a wrong that wasn't really all that wrong in a way. Like, yeah, he lost the fight, but it wasn't like, you know, it was just one of those fights. Everybody was like, did we really just sit here and watch this? You know, like nobody really wants to ever. I don't know anybody that's rewatched that fight for the second time. I don't. That's got to be the lowest rewatchable fight in UFC history, I think. But considering those two men that are involved, it's crazy that first one played out like that. I think the second one has zero chance of looking like the first one. So that's why it's so intriguing to me. So I want to see it. But we have this wild card that we've kind of talked about already a little bit in Jon Jones, who was out there just in the wind, kind of floating around. And since he's been knocking on heavyweight's door, it just makes sense to put him immediately in a title fight because it's Jon Jones. It's Jon Jones. And I mean, if you want to wait after this fight, put him against the winner of Derrick Lewis and Ngannou, that's fine with me. That's fine with me. But I don't like the idea of putting Jon Jones in another fight first, because what happens if Jon Jones loses his heavyweight debut? What would you do with Jon Jones at that point? You know, what would you do? I mean, unless you're going to put him in there against like Olynyk or something, like,
right?
I mean, what would the scenario be if Jon Jones lost his heavyweight debut and it wasn't a title fight?
I mean, Stipe is the obvious one, right?
Yeah, Stipe is the obvious one. Speaking of which, I think you said that on purpose.
Maybe I did.
Based on some Jon Jones tweets that have since been deleted that I will read and let you continue to react to. These are now deleted tweets from Jon Jones. Don't get excited, people. I'm not fighting Stipe. I'm not here to fight Stipe, but I will defend my belt against him, no problem. I'm looking for the biggest draw, and I'm willing to wait. 33 years old and better athlete right now than I've ever been before. I'm just going to keep training my ass off. And here's the one that really gets me, that I'm glad was deleted. But, you know, with the internet, nothing's ever really deleted. I'm sick of the same shit. You're not a big enough star. You don't bring enough actual pay-per-view. I'm ready to fight fights that will bring in the pay-per-view. Interesting how he said that. The world wants to see some black on black crime right now, and I'm ready to give it to them. Boy, I hate that last sentence. But Drake, when you hear those now deleted tweets about Jon Jones and his outlook on his arrival to the heavyweight division, what do you think?
Yeah, that last part's kind of out there, isn't it? It's a little it's interesting. We'll leave it at that. But you know, the first tweet, I'm assuming that was 2 tweets, probably how Jon goes about all of that. It makes sense, you know, like we've said, his position as one of the greatest of all time, controversy aside, a light heavyweight champion with all these title defenses to his name. You should kind of get that, you know, it's a step, hopefully, you know, towards better treatment for fighters, champions at the very least, especially of his caliber. But it's not to that point yet, I don't think. But the more that you go on about it, it just becomes talk unless something happens or he caves, which you don't want to see. But that's how the good old fun MMA community is going to view it at some point. It's starting to view it, I think, whether it's from the help of Dana White narrative saying the guy just doesn't want to fight, man. So, you know, like, that's how that goes. But he makes points, and it's kind of hard not to agree with that position when you're him. And this is such a unique thing to get. Why would you have to wait for another title fight to play out when you pretty much just did that with Stipe and Ngannou too? Yeah, we pretty much already saw this, didn't we? Because, you know, Jon, of course, he wanted his time to go up and bulk up as he's doing, but there was that gap and window where he very well could have skipped over Francis. But, you know, now we're kind of going through that again. So it's a little bit just same old kind of what we've been hearing in this recent saga, I think, aside from, you know, the second part of that, as you mentioned. But I don't know, man. Like, I've done really well not getting excited about it because, as I said, don't believe it's going to happen. But I don't know, man. It is what it is.
Yeah, yeah, it's a weird situation that we're all in right now. I mean, because we all want to see. We've all been wanting to see for years what Jon Jones would look like at heavyweight. And now that we're so close to it, like there's so many other factors in play right now. Like all of a sudden, like we can't pay the greatest, fighter of all time what he's worth. Like it's, we can't get him the fight that he wants like right away. Like there's just so many issues that just shouldn't be present when we're talking about Jon Jones. It's a mess, man. It is a mess. Hopefully it all gets sorted out. I am curious to know what people think in the comments below. What about the matchup between Francis Ngannou and Derrick Lewis too? How do you guys see that playing out? Do you think it's going to be better than the first fight? I think that's an easy yes. But how do you see it playing out? Does Francis get his first title defense? Does Derrick Lewis finally become champion? A lot of intriguing ways that this could play out. Drake, what do you feel happens? How do you feel that one plays out if it is the fight that happens this summer?
Well, Matt, if we're going to go off of that last performance from Francis Ngannou, as we were all very, very impressed with on the night of, and since then, I believe still fair to say, that guy looks borderline unbeatable. I think that, if he continues to look that goddamn good, it's going to be very, 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 very tough to beat him. But against a guy like Derrick Lewis, who has maybe not the same Ford Escort level of power, but damn near close, it's got one of the best chances for just a puncher's chance, which is more than a lot of people might have against this version of Francis. So, as we've seen, it doesn't matter what round, what minute, what second of the fight that it is, Derrick Lewis can put your lights out. So that gives him a very solid chance, and probably more of a chance than I would give most other heavyweights right now. So that's very compelling to see how that goes. And I think that Francis felt that way in the first fight, obviously, but this is a new version of Francis. Clearly, I don't think he's going to feel the same. It's going to be wild. I honestly think he's probably going to try and take this to the ground. It really show us that wrestling he's been working on. But yeah, it's going to be interesting, man. But early lean, I'm probably going to be on the side of Francis in every fight until he loses at this point.
It's interesting. It's interesting because we're talking about this newly calculated Francis Ngannou that showed up against Stipe, right? That is the last thing I want to see is a even more calculated Francis Ngannou in the Derrick Lewis rematch. But hopefully this time around it actually, results in some fireworks. Like you said, maybe we'll get to see a nice blast double and, something that we haven't seen yet. Yeah. But yeah, a more reserved Stipe Francis gives me a little bit of a pause for concern there. But if I'm picking a winner in this fight, I'm going to go early lean Francis Ngannou as well. But like you said, man, if Derrick Lewis touches you, he just needs to do it once. And although we have not seen Francis Ngannou fall like that just yet, if anyone can make it happen, I think it's Derrick Lewis. And if we're throwing in a third option in Jon Jones, I'm going to say that, I don't know. Tell me what you think would happen if Jon Jones ended up in this fight against Francis. How would you think that played
out? Well, I think that these are just different guys, different size to these men that Jon Jones would be competing against, and going right in there against the best of them and one of the biggest of them, the most powerful. He's got all these things in his favor, right? I could just list them all off. I think it's not a great matchup for Jon, and Jon surely will have more power at heavyweight, especially as he continues to pack on the power, but he's never been a knockout artist, especially with his fists. Yes, we've seen him get knockouts with, head kicks and whatnot, and he has stunned people. Machida kind of with, what was it, a Superman punch? Very odd, but it worked. He just hasn't been much of a knockout artist, and surely that could change at heavyweight. But again, against a guy like Francis, who we haven't seen iced before at heavyweight because he's quicker to the punch than everybody, And if he's got this new and improved takedown defense, which he showed off against Stipe, who's a rather good wrestler in his own right, with that size, I believe he can avoid it from Jon. Just if we're going to go off what we've seen from both of them so far, it's still a mystery with Jones. But man, for him, if he takes a Francis bomb, doesn't matter who you are if you take a Francis bomb. Except, I mean, Stipe was pretty good at it until it just came to be too much in the second fight. So, like I said, man, I'm not bigoted against Francis until I have reason to. So, I think he'd get it done, honestly.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree, man. I would think like Jon would try to get it in the clinch and then realize like how strong Francis is, and then it could just be a world of trouble from there. But I think he would try to make it as ugly of a fight as possible, I think. Or just try to stay at range and, do his Jon Jones thing.
Right.
But I don't know, getting clipped from one of those freaking lunch boxes coming at your face, like, I don't know. I don't know how many Jon can take. I don't know. We'll see. Let us know in the comments below what you think about these potential matchups this summer, obviously, and where do you think Jon Jones fits in this whole picture? There's a lot of different ways this can obviously shake out, and we have some time before it becomes a little bit more clear. But at least for now, it looks like Ngannou Lewis 2 is on the horizon, and we'll see how it plays out coming to a box office near you this summer.